And I'll tell you someone else who I know right now is going to make some very good points. She always does. It's Talk's brilliant international editor, Isabel Oakeshott. Good morning, Isabel. Here we are in the day.
Good morning. I mean, the papers just make such grim reading this morning, don't they? I mean, I'm simply, well, I'd like to say stunned that there's been yet another horrific apparent murder on the streets of London. Apparently, perpetrator is an Afghan national.
Being arrested on suspicion. Yeah, I mean, it's heartbreaking if you see these pictures of this. I mean, you know, you always sort of say, but he looks like such a nice guy. Wayne Broadhurst is his name. He's 49 years old. He's just taking his little dog for a walk. I've had the misfortune. I don't recommend this to anyone, but there is a video going around. I've seen the video. I've seen this frenzied attack. Poor Wayne, you know, just stabbed time and time again. And somehow, almost the most heartbreaking aspect of this shocking video is his little dog sort of dancing around, yapping, tail wagging, not quite sure what's happening. His master, his owner, is getting stabbed to death. The person arrested on suspicion of that is a 22-year-old Afghani asylum seeker, came here 5 years ago illegally on the back of a lorry, was subsequently allowed to stay, and you'll never guess what. I'm sure this is just coincidental, Isabel, but on this street where this horror unfolded, there is an asylum seeker house of multiple occupation. Make of that what you will.
Well, there's a few points I'd like to pick up. First, that he apparently came over on the back of a lorry. Now, while so much of our attention is focused on the Channel crossings, I can tell you, because I've been doing some very interesting undercover
I know
work.
You have.
I can tell you that at this point, the Channel crossings are not exactly sort of ceasing, but they are winding down very significantly. The weather in northern France has been rough for a long time now, and this is what happens over winter. You do get a few crossings, but that doesn't mean the market is in any way diminished for getting over to the UK, and our attention really hasn't been on for a number of years. The sheer number of people that are coming over still in the back of lorries. You know, this used to be the big story about illegal immigration in this country. And actually, you know, it's still going on a massive scale. And, you know, we're all too sort of absorbed on the Channel side of it, documenting those numbers. And as for this latest utter horror, I think people are just left feeling, how much more is it going to take for governments, and it's not this government, it's a previous government that allowed this absolute monster to stay. How much more evidence do they need that bringing people in from the world's worst places is not a clever idea? It's not kind, it is reckless. And every week in Britain, innocent British people are paying, sometimes with their lives.
I'll tell you, I'll give you a snapshot of exactly what you're talking about. The problem here is, and it's reaching crisis point, critical mass if you like, we have now for many years, too many years, been allowing in thousands and thousands and thousands of mainly young men who break into our country illegally. We somehow, for some reason, allow them to stay. We usually grant them asylum. They hail from very different cultures, from countries with very different attitudes towards women and children. And I'll give you just one case that illustrates what I'm saying. This was several months back. It was a 26-year-old Afghani migrant and an asylum seeker who crossed the Channel on an illegal boat. In the manner of these things, was welcomed into the warm embrace of our be kind culture, and immediately billeted in a nice hotel in Falkirk in Scotland. He was sent up there. He pretty much sort of unpacked his case and walked straight out onto the streets of Falkirk, found himself a young, vulnerable white girl, 15 years old, took her behind the back of a local pub and brutally raped her. He was then arrested, thank God for that, went to court, and his defence, his lawyer's defence was, well, he comes from a culture, Afghanistan, he comes from a culture where they have a different attitude to rape, and he didn't realise it was such a serious offence here in this country. When he got done for 12 years, he was sentenced to 12 years, a decent sentence for once, he went berserk in the court saying, oh, I didn't know, come on, as if to say, well, back in my country, this sort of thing is no big deal. That is at the centre of the crisis we have now. We've got thousands and thousands of young men all over the country from these strange different countries with different cultures who don't understand our attitudes to the safety of women and children. That's at the heart of it, isn't it?
Absolutely, but this is on every level. So that's at the extreme end of it. Of course, hopefully the majority of those who come over illegally don't turn out to be violent sex offenders and attackers. But the problem is much wider than that. At the lowest level, however peaceful and innocent they may be, I'm afraid that a very large proportion of those coming over I'm going to give an example here from sub-Saharan African cultures where they don't even use a knife and fork. I'm not, being racist or making this up. This is just a different way of living, okay? And if you are bringing people into our country for whom using a knife and fork is a learning curve, it's not part of their culture, for whom it's difficult even to find the English language to say what country they are from. And I have experience of this in the migrant camps of Calais. We are bringing over people with so little English, they can't even say where they're from. How is that going to work out in our communities? Put them all together in a hotel setting, and that in itself is a powder keg, and we know all the problems associated with that. But disperse them into communities. Are you telling me that's any way better for our country than having these people sprinkled everywhere? Absolutely no idea where they are or what they're doing. That's the people themselves. And as for communities, how do you help those people begin to live meaningful lives in our country? This is all so wrong-headed. When people arrive by these routes, they need to be detained. That is the solution. You don't just allow them to disperse, lose track of them. By all means, put them in military barracks. Great idea, but those military barracks should not be used as some kind of slightly austere holiday camps. They need to be detention centres. That is the only way we get on top of this.
And also, I think, Isabel, as a matter of urgency, despite what Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, says, if these asylum seekers who come to this country, these migrants who break into our country illegally, for some reason we let them stay, if they do that, and then they go on to commit crimes. She said that if you commit crimes in this country, you will be removed. She's referring to Hadush Kabatu, the child sex offender who has just been deported back to Ethiopia. He's the one that was ludicrously accidentally released from Chelmsford Jail on Friday, recaptured on Sunday. And because he became a sort of celebrity asylum seeker sex offender, the government got its act in order and got rid of him very, very quickly. A lot of people saying, well, why can't you do that with more asylum seeker criminals? The Mail on Sunday in the summer found they went through a third of our, I think, around about 400 asylum seeker hotels and found that of the residents, only of a third, 708 have been charged with serious crimes. The Sun, in a 6-month period on half of the hotels, found that 339 of the residents have been charged. So there is a serious problem with more and more of these asylum seekers coming here. They don't understand our laws. They don't appreciate them, I think, in some circles, and they're just breaking them. And Shabana Mahmood said, if you come to this country and you break our laws, you commit crimes, you will be removed. That is simply not true. You know, we know so often you get paedophile asylum seekers who go to jail for 3 years, come out, and then they're able to stay because of their human rights, because if they went back to Syria, they might be persecuted, because in Syria, they take a dim view of paedophiles. Last time I looked, we take quite a dim view of them here in Britain as well. This is mad. This is all mad.
The government is completely overcomplicating this. Here's what other countries do, high-functioning countries. If you enter illegally, you are turned back at the border. You know, when was the last time someone tried to do this in a tough country in the Middle East? I mean, the irony here is that the least desirable countries often have the toughest immigration laws. You can't just rock up and then expect to be accommodated. So here's a solution. You know, if you come into our country illegally across the Channel, you are simply detained and deported. You're not allowed time to commit crimes on our shores. The trouble is, under our current international treaty so-called obligations, the minute you set foot on British shores, and I don't just mean on the land of Great Britain, it's even on a British flagged vessel in British waters, you suddenly acquire all these mythical, human rights, which I just think that we need to dispense with in a sensitive and considered way. And the problem is we're allowing people to come in and then make absolute use of that whole raft of international human rights legislation, aided and abetted by do-gooding left-wing lawyers who are doing not any good for our country or the good people of our country, as we've seen with yet another horror on our streets this week.
Yeah, by the way, this follows the conviction last week of an asylum seeker up in the Midlands, Walsall. He was found guilty in Wolverhampton Crown Court of the most horrendous murder. Poor girl who worked at the asylum seeker hotel. I think she just served the coffee or something, worked behind reception. He stabbed her 23 times with a screwdriver, and then was seen dancing and shrieking with excitement after committing this atrocity. He's gone to jail. So that's last week. This week, an asylum seeker arrested on suspicion of another horrific stabbing. There is something badly going wrong here in this country. Robert Bates from the Centre for Migration Control just summed it up wonderfully, I thought. He just said, we, the people of this country, we shouldn't have to live like this. And he's right. Meanwhile, as I say, Shabana Mahmood crowing about getting Hadush Kabatu out of the country. I've pulled every lever, this is her tweet, by the way, Isabel. I've pulled every lever to deport Mr. Kabatu and remove him off British soil. She means from British soil, of course. I am pleased to confirm this vile child sex offender has been deported. Our streets are safer because of it. If you come to this country and commit crimes, we will remove you. That is a lie. And pulling every lever, by the way, we have a returns agreement with Ethiopia, so getting him out of the country was actually pretty easy. What people are asking is, well, if you're able to do it so swiftly, so decisively with this one guy, what about the other 10,000 migrant foreigners in our jails right now, who no doubt will complete their sentences and then be allowed back into the country? Why don't you deport them now with the same swift efficiency that you got rid of Mr. Kabatu?
Well, Shabana Mahmood has got this sort of self-styled reputation as being particularly tough and hardline on this and I look forward to seeing daily, if not hourly, evidence of that so-called uncompromising approach to the problems facing this country. But I don't do so with any kind of bated breath. These problems are now fundamental. They are systemic. We import more danger every day, put very simply. We expose ourselves to risk every time we allow in undocumented males with no idea what their backstory is. And the trouble is that these people that make their way to Dunkirk and Calais come from terrible places. You know, no one's saying they've had an easy, nice life. You know, they are leaving awful places, but they're doing so deeply damaged and traumatized. And if that sounds a bit, you know, Guardian, well, it's true. The trouble is, you know, these deeply traumatized people then go on to do awful things in our country, and it doesn't always happen immediately. You know, a number of the worst cases have taken several years, sometimes more, even generational, as we saw with Axel Rudikabana, whose parents fled the Rwanda genocide, and then, you know, their son went on to do the horrors we know he did in Southport. So it's not instant. You know, of course, not everybody who comes from a war zone goes on to be a terrible part of our society here in the UK. Some, of course, do make a positive contribution. But, you know, when people are that damaged, they also do very damaging things.
Absolutely. Well, Isabel, I'm rather enjoying our conversations in the daytime. Let's do it again soon. But we talked about some very serious stuff there, and always good to have you on the show. Thank you very much. That's Isabel Oakeshott, Talks International editor.